In a few days' time, the World Championship match between Magnus Carlsen and Viswanathan Anand begins in Sochi. For me, World Chess Championship matches are the high point of the chess scene, and I'm really looking forward to it. Of course, it's a repeat of their match from last year, but the dynamics are a bit different. Of course, Magnus has the weight of the crown on his head. It's going to be interesting to see whether that changes things a little bit. And they're playing in Sochi, a neutral venue, so maybe there'll be less pressure on Anand. They've played a few times since their match last year. In Zurich, they played 3 games, 1 blitz, 1 rapid, 1 classical game. The rapid and classical weren't too interesting, they were draws, but if you recall the blitz game went very well for Magnus Carlsen. I've already shown this game in a previous clip, but let me just remind you of the finish. Anand has just retreated the knight c6, hitting the queen, but Magnus didn't care about that. He played knight e8 check, which forced resignation. Of course, if the queen is taken, then rook takes bishop is mate. And if king g8, then you can force mate in the same way with queen h8. And rook takes bishop, a really convincing crush. Now, they played a couple more times in 2014 in Dubai, in the World Blitz Championship and then the World Rapid Championship. 1 game was drawn, the Blitz game, not very interesting, but Vishy did well in the Rapid, as I'm sure you know. Let me show you the end of this game. It's quite impressive, actually. Well, it's a position of dynamic equality. It's been a fairly even game until this point, and the game should end in a draw if White plays, say, king c1, bring the king a little bit closer to the pawn, or another decent move is e4, trying to liquidate pawns. Should be a draw. This is a dangerous pawn, but White should have it under control. Instead, Carlsen blundered with knight e6. Now, it's a rapid game. One can't criticise. It's quite possible that he thought he was liquidating to a draw. Perhaps he thought that after this move, of course, with 2 pieces in its sight, perhaps he thought that this was forcing a draw, so that if rook takes bishop, knight takes a4, well, that will be a draw. But instead, a3 is just a winning move. The pawn is going to go home. So the knight had to go back the other way. Obviously, Anand has won a piece, and still retains the passed pawn at the edge of the board. But needs really good technique, and considering this is a rapid game, well, this is very impressive from Anand. First of all, rook b6, excellent move, cutting off White's king, preventing the king coming over to block the pawn. Very good move. It drops the d pawn, and that attacks the rook, but very calm move from Anand, just keeping the rook, cutting off the White king. The knight came back, and the pawn advanced. Now, White really has nothing better than to advance his pawns, and now comes the next stage. Anand brought his king up the board just to block these pawns, and now this is the first position of Zugzwang. However White plays, it means it compromises his position. His position deteriorates. So, for example, if g5, then that allows Black's king in and takes the pawn. If the knight moves back, then rook b2 check wins. So Carlsen played king c1. And now, very nice manoeuvring from Anand. Rook c7, there's a pin. Now, if king c2, then a2 will win. So king d2. Rook a7. This forces the knight to block the pawn. And now rook b7, threatening a check. If knight c3, then a2 wins. If that's taken, then rook b2 check. So the king has to come to c3. And now White's pieces are awkwardly placed. And again, we have a position of Zugzwang. A beautiful move from Anand. Just waiting. So let me see. Lots of moves that White can possibly try. Knight b4, well, that just gets taken. And the a pawn goes through. What else could white try? Knight c1, this loses. Then rook c8 check. The king has to go back to cover the knight, and then king d5, and the king is going to take this pawn. What else have we got? King c4 is possible, but then simply rook b2 and the a pawn goes through. So Carlsen had nothing better than to push his pawn on the king side. Now this allows the king in. Basically, black's king is going to sweep up all these pawns. White can do nothing about it. So Carlsen tried at least to play and to distract black's rook away from the queen side, so now he can bring his king closer. Now it's problematic if the rook goes behind the pawn, but Anand chose the correct method, checking from the side. And now basically he just brought his king in, well, round this way, and managed to attack the knight, and Carlsen was forced to resign. I don't want to go through all the moves, but from here on it's pretty simple. So that was their last encounter. Perhaps that will give Anand a little bit of confidence, but okay, it's only a rapid play game. What about their form? Well, some people have criticised or given Carlsen a hard time over his form this year. In the Olympiad, well, he lost a couple of games, but actually he still had a 2800 performance in the Olympiad. What about St. Louis, where he came second? Well, his performance there was still 28-22. Of course, he was in the shadow of Caruana with his amazing performance, starting the tournament with 7 out of 7 there. But still, second place in St. Louis was not a bad result. So I wouldn't say Carlsen's been particularly out of form. What about Anand? Well, of course, he came back by winning the candidates. Has he changed his style? Have things changed? Well, I don't think so, actually. It's just that he eliminated the blunders. He still only won 3 games in that candidates tournament and drew the rest. He was still pretty much safety first. And I think that will be the key to whether Anand can do well in this match. Last year, sometimes he failed to grab his chances at the critical moments. He played safety first. I think he's got to somehow seize every moment, seize every opportunity to keep the initiative and to try and exploit any weakness that Carlsen makes. As for Carlsen, well, of course, we know that he's very, very strong in these long games. His endgame technique is superb. It's going to be interesting to see whether he relies just on that or whether he takes on Anand theoretically, whether he'll play sharp opening variations or whether he'll continue to almost kind of improvise in the opening, just getting the ball over the net and playing these long games, or whether he's going to play, strongly, heavily theoretical openings. So that's going to be interesting to see. Anyway, first game is on Saturday. I'm going to be commentating on playchess.com live. Do join me then. And I'll be giving reports after each game. You can find them on my PowerPlayChess channel. I'll also be giving reports in German for those German speakers, and they'll be on the Der Spiegel website, so look out for those. I'm looking forward to it. Do join me.